Finding a good sports team name is hard. Not only is it impossible to appease all your potential fans, but it's extremely difficult to gauge whether or not the name you have selected has long-term staying power. The Diamondbacks took hold. The Devil Rays, well, Tampa still isn't sure what it wants the baseball team's name to be or mean. That being said, there are a few clear-cut rules when naming a professional sports franchise. First, nothing crass or that implies crassness. Second, nothing so jokey that it can be used against your team and its fans. And finally, you should definitely not use a name that has already been trademarked by someone else. When Kansas City was granted an expansion MLS charter franchise in the mid-90s, Lamar Hunt and those he put in charge of the soccer team managed to fall foul of all three rules. I mean, you have to really be trying your hardest to find a name that breaks all three. There was a silver lining in KC. A year later, they would be forced to drop the Wiz moniker. I'm Cheyenne Hollis, this is The Touchback, and today we have the story of a professional sports team that lost its name to an electronics store, and to learn more about that, we travel all the way back to 1996. I'm not 100% sure that's the right use of the word wonder here, but let's just go with it. The Kansas City MLS franchise, one of the league's founding clubs, was certainly no marvel. Instead, people were wondering, see what I did there, just what the hell those running the franchise were doing. You see, before they were Sporting Kansas City and before they were the Kansas City Wizards, the team was known as the Kansas City Wiz. In hindsight, the entire 1996 MLS launch was nothing but stupid team names and brutal jerseys that we now look back on with fondness due to various reasons. This was without question the most mid-1990s thing ever, wrapped in the form of a soccer league. Seriously, I'm surprised the Colorado Rapids didn't just name themselves the Colorado Radical Dudes, shoutouts Nest Drunk, or that the New York MLS franchise didn't opt for the name the New York, New Jersey Motorola Two-Way Pagers. You're probably saying to yourself, no team could do that because Motorola would have been a registered trademark. They had rights to that name. A very fair point. Yet, a Major League Soccer franchise found itself in hot water for doing that very thing. In 1995, it was announced that the Kansas City professional soccer franchise in the new league would be known as The Wiz. No one has actually gone on record to say this, but the common consensus was the name was inspired by the movie The Wizard of Oz. The movie has obvious ties to Kansas, although the team actually played in Missouri at Arrowhead Stadium. There are a lot of different threads here, so let's just keep a hold of the one that relates to this video, the team name. In a desperate need for everything to be the bomb.com, those in charge of MLS branding put forth the Wiz team name for the Kansas City franchise. The Wiz, of course, being the hip, or as us white people have been fond of saying over the years, urban version of The Wizard of Oz. Most people would be familiar with the movie version of The Wiz, which was released in 1978 and featured Diana Ross and Michael Jackson. That was based on a musical that first hit Broadway in 1974. Hunt would go on to deny the team name had anything to do with The Wiz or The Wizard of Oz, but I mean, come on, it would be like the Mighty Ducks trying to distance themselves from being named after the Disney franchise of movies. I mean, we can all put two and two together here. Regardless, the Wiz name was not well received by fans in Kansas City. An informal poll by the Kansas City Star newspaper found that almost 90% of respondents disliked the name, mostly because those folks associated it with urination. You know, taking a whiz. Anyway, it turns out not only was the name dumb, but it also potentially infringed on an already existing trademark. Apparently, neither the owners of the Kansas City MLS franchise nor the league did any research about the name they chose. If they'd ever bothered to watch a New York Yankees game around this time, then they would have seen out on the outfield wall an advertisement for a company called The Wiz, or technically Nobody Beats the Wiz. In fact, it was just about impossible to spend any time in New York City without seeing the brand's name and logo somewhere. They were best known as the company that once allowed New York Knicks players to call plays for New York Jets quarterback Boomer Esiason.
Yeah, I need to pick the way. Throw the bomb, man. Play action pass. Let's go to screen. Fake inside, sweep outside. Just stuff it down their throat. All right, man.
Okay, that's just a commercial. That's not a real thing. The Knicks weren't calling plays for the Jets, although they might as well have been in the mid-1990s. Moving on. The company The Wiz, or Nobody Beats the Wiz, had been around since 1977. However, it was during the early 1990s that the company really began to expand, with upwards of 80 stores at one point, most of which were located in New York and New Jersey, but some could be found in nearby states. It was by no means a national powerhouse, but it was still a brand that even I, an 11-year-old kid in California, knew existed. Before we go on, let's talk a little bit about the name itself, The Wiz, or Nobody Beats the Wiz. It can be a bit confusing, so here's the deal. The company was originally called The Wiz, and their slogan was Nobody Beats the Wiz. They liked the slogan so much they just changed the name to officially be called Nobody Beats the Wiz. They would eventually go back to the Wiz name after they were bought out by Cablevision in the late 90s. None of that matters though, because they held the IP to both Nobody Beats the Wiz and The Wiz. Unsurprisingly, those running Nobody Beats the Wiz was none too happy about a Major League Soccer franchise in Kansas City using a name that was, well, basically theirs. At some point during the initial season, the electronics store filed a lawsuit against the team for using its trademarked name. Not much has ever been made public about the lawsuit or the negotiations between the electronics store and the MLS team. We do know the club initially thought about fighting the lawsuit, but ultimately opted against this and just went ahead and changed their name ahead of the 1997 season. In fact, here's one of the only quotes I can find from someone going on record about the Kansas City Wiz Nobody Beats the Wiz lawsuit. "We got sued for having the worst name ever. If you want an insult, try dealing with a lawsuit when your name is the Wiz and you can't even keep that." That was from Rob Thompson, who worked for the club and would eventually become Sporting Kansas City's chief communication officer. This really highlights just what a farcical situation the team found itself in. No one liked the name. Even in '96, it was a gag name. Everyone thought about taking a Wiz. It just sucked. Yet at the same time, the team didn't really want to change its name after only 1 year in existence. But they also had no legal footing to stand on here. The electronics chain clearly had the rights to the name and had had them for decades at this point. If anyone involved in the naming process for the Kansas City Wiz had done even the littlest amount of research, they would have uncovered this and the team would have never been named the Wiz to begin with. It's not like we're talking about they needed to do a deep dive into IP. This was an easy thing to spot. The Wiz were forced to change their name to the Wizards, an improvement but not by much. Ironically, the Kansas City Wiz could have just waited out the Wiz for the rights to the team name. The retailer filed for bankruptcy protections in 1998, nearly going belly up before being bought by Cablevision. The arrangement was a disaster, with Cablevision pulling the plug on the Wiz in 2003, closing down all stores and entering bankruptcy proceedings. PC Richard would end up paying $1.6 million for the names and trademarks of the Wiz. It's a shame we don't know how much it cost the MLS side to settle with the Wiz, and then the price of the subsequent rebranding. Was it more or less than $1.6 million? I would really like to know. Alas, that information is not available. This, by the way, would not be the only hubbub surrounding the name of the Kansas City MLS team. Wizards proved to be just as unpopular among fans. Interestingly, it was reported that generic MLS branded merchandise was outselling Kansas City Wizard merchandise at various points in the 2000s. The team then underwent another name change as they moved into a new stadium ahead of the 2010 season. Sporting Kansas City faced some early resistance, but eventually has gone on to be accepted. I'm disappointed that the team didn't listen to my suggestion for a new name that would have paid homage to the Kansas City Wiz moniker, calling themselves the Kansas City PC Richard. What are you gonna do? Focusing back on the new Sporting KC Stadium, well, the club unfortunately gave naming rights to Livestrong, otherwise known as the Lance Armstrong Yellow Bracelet charity. 2 years into that naming rights partnership, and things deteriorated spectacularly. The original agreement between club and charity saw Sporting KC donate money each year. Of course, at the start of 2013 is when Lance Armstrong, the face of Livestrong, was admitting to being a drugs cheat. Now, according to the soccer club, right before Lance Armstrong's huge explosive interview with Oprah Winfrey, the charity came to it demanding a huge donation to be made based on future promises. Given the negative press surrounding the cyclist and in turn the charity, Sporting KC officials were not particularly receptive to that approach, going as far as to calling it aggressive. A few days later, and the naming rights agreement was terminated, putting it in the bin with all of the other naming follies surrounding Kansas City soccer over the years. None, though, are quite as embarrassing as being the MLS team that lost its name to an electronics store. Thank you for watching this video. If you'd like to know the story behind the University of Washington name, the Huskies, and why a student joke almost prevented that from happening, video lower right-hand corner of your screen. And to hear the wild tale of the Memphis Grizzlies trying to sell their own team name, video upper right-hand corner of your screen. Until next time, I'm Cheyenne Hollis. This is The Touchback, and as always, hashtag take it out to the 25.
Nobody beats me because I'm the Wiz. Yes, I'm the Wiz. I'm the Wiz.